The term Renaissance usually calls to mind the art of 15th and 16th century Italy, but the nations north of the Alps experienced a brilliant flowering of art in the same era of history. Many call it the Northern Renaissance. In this program, through the collection in these Hermitage palaces, you'll trace the emergence of realism in the Netherlands, the modern Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg. The elegant aristocratic international style, based on Gothic forms, gave way to a powerful, hard-edged realism filled with light and brilliant color. A fresh, humanistic approach to painting was born, along with a new interest in portraiture and landscape painting. It was not a Renaissance in the same sense as the Italian Renaissance. In the north, there were no classical sculptures or paintings to rediscover. Netherlandish painters relied instead on the world around them. Their careful observation of life led to an art of brilliantly detailed realism. The Gothic style, as seen in this wooden sculpture of the Archangel Michael slaying a dragon, began to fall by the wayside. The 15th century in the Netherlands bore witness to a new prosperity, the rise of a large middle class and a new world view. You can see the new realism in these mourners sculpted for the tomb of Philip the Bold. He was one of the Dukes of Burgundy, great patrons of the arts, who ruled substantial portions of the Netherlands in the 15th century. This is Robert Campin's exceptional early 15th century work, The Holy Trinity. In this age, art in the north, as elsewhere, was still deeply rooted in religious fervor. But even church-commissioned altarpieces reflected a new, more democratic and humanistic view of life. The humanity of religious figures was stressed. As an altarpiece, the Holy Trinity was designed to be joined with the Virgin and Child. Campin portrays each character of the Holy Trinity, the lifeless body of Christ, the Holy Ghost here symbolized by a white dove, and God with a hearty and uncompromising vision. Campin invests his religious panels with the material details of everyday life. He removes the golden halo from the Virgin's head and transforms the common Flemish household into a holy setting. The fire signals the Virgin's purity, but the context for such symbolism is now taken from common places rather than lofty ones. A close look at the window shutter reveals the nails and hinges. The infinite details of life were included with almost encyclopedic breadth. One can trace within the Hermitage's collection of Netherlandish art the gradual rise of landscape painting. A far-stretching vista forms the backdrop of Roger van der Weyden's St. Luke painting the Virgin. St. Luke was the patron saint of the Artists' Guild and hence the spiritual father of all artists. It is believed that he used his own likeness to portray St. Luke. Setting the Virgin and Child close to the viewer, van der Weyden achieves a grand immediacy to his work. Like Campin before him, van der Weyden renders the broad strokes as well as the barely visible minutiae of the visible world. This gem of the Hermitage collection has not always been in such good condition. Cut in 2 pieces and smuggled out of Spain, the painting hung for a long time in a monastery. Re-emerging years later in separate collections, the 2 halves were joined together by the Hermitage in 1883. The precision and brilliant colour of Netherlandish paintings can partly be traced to the new medium of oil paint perfected by Jan van Eyck. Here, Geertken tot Sint-Jans uses oils to paint St. Bavo in a landscape of glowing colour. Acquired by the Hermitage before 1797, Hugo van der Goes' The Adoration of the Magi is believed to be one of the first Netherlandish paintings to come to Russia. In the central panel, the three Magi bear gold, frankincense, and myrrh for the newly born Christ child. Using the medieval device of showing events from different times in the same work, van der Goes heightens the drama of his composition. Just beside the festive parable of the Magi looms the terror of the massacre of the innocents. He portrays a large and varied tableau of characters, each responding individually to the drama of the scene. At once terrifying, instructive, and devotional, van der Goes' bitter realism becomes a plea for kindness and generosity toward all humanity. Van der Goes' deeply felt and introspective works were extremely well received in his own time, and he served for a number of years as Dean of the Ghent Painters Guild. We owe much of the intensity of van der Goes' art to his quest to revive the religious piety of the past. His lamentation over the dead Christ is an expression of high drama and fierce, overwhelming emotion. Van der Goes was never to fully enjoy his success. At the height of his career, when he was 40, he retreated to a monastery where he soon had a mental collapse, dying shortly thereafter in 1482. It is a richly textured painting of poignant moments and penetrating realism. The rhythmical line of the figures, the brilliant color, the sharp focus create an atmosphere of deep grief and mourning. It was common in the 17th century to encircle small pictures with painted flowers or fruit. This frame was added 200 years after Gerard David painted his 15th century Virgin embracing the dead Christ. By the 16th century, hints of a little understood Italian influence entered Netherlandish art through the work of the German artist Albrecht Dürer, who visited Antwerp amid tremendous acclaim. Jean Balgam's Annunciation is an early attempt at a more modern style. The setting is grand church architecture. The donor who commissioned the work is allowed to be actually present at the Annunciation. The Archangel Gabriel appears before an elongated, aristocratic Virgin Mary with news of Christ's birth. The softened drapery and muted colors mark the beginnings of a departure from the hard-edged realism of the previous century. The Virgin sits on the floor, emphasizing her humanity. The stress on the authority and command of the Church may be a reflection of the new rulers of the Netherlands. During the first 3 quarters of the 15th century, the Netherlands were largely controlled by the Dukes of Burgundy, who at one time ruled all the lands from southern France to the North Sea. By the 16th century, the Netherlands became part of the Holy Roman Empire, which was headed by the Habsburg dynasty based in Spain. It was a government determined to spread and preserve the Catholic faith. At the same time, another powerful group was rising to prominence through the tremendous success of the ports of Bruges and Antwerp, a wealthy merchant class. As they became important patrons, the demand for portraits soared. Here, a young man holds a carnation, a symbol of one who has chosen love and is ready to devote himself to it. The painting may be a fiancé portrait. In arranged marriages, portraits of the betrothed were often exchanged by the prospective bride and bridegroom. France's King Charles VI is said to have based his decision for a queen on commissioned portraits of 3 prospective brides. Painted by Marinus von Remersval, this portrait of 2 men is descriptively entitled Tax Collectors. It offers an historical account of the garb, manners, and customs of such officials, as well as a moral judgment of those motivated by greed and avarice. From the words formed with the stroke of a pen to the coins held tightly, each detail is a clue to the meaning of the painting. The wigs and costumes are of the very kind worn by tax collectors of the day. The Netherlandish artist tells the story through the details. In his landscape with the legend of St. Christopher, Jan Mandine, pupil and successor to Hieronymus Bosch, paints a world of dark pessimism and fear. The severed head of St. Christopher hangs from a tree, over a world of wild horror and fantastic violence. The work is Mandine's bitter and damning prediction of man's doom. The ship of fools can hardly stay afloat in the perilous current. The people, preoccupied with fleeting and indulgent amusement, have lost sight of their salvation. Only St. Christopher is fighting the waves to carry Christ across the river. Christ sits on a globe symbolizing his divinity. Devils are dressed as specific characters. One wears a monk's habit, another a burgher's hat. They carry the attributes of everyday human life, but here, human invention is used for destruction rather than enrichment. In the legend, a hermit carried a lamp to guide Christopher as he carried Christ across the river. Christopher became a minister of Christianity, but was later beheaded for his faith. For Netherlanders of the 16th century, St. Christopher was considered a protector from violent death, and as such, a patron of workers and travelers. The parable, The Healing of the Blind Man at Jericho by Lucas van Leyden, was painted for a city hospital. On the side panels of the altarpiece, Leyden depicts a herald and a maiden holding the coats of arms of the patrons. The fact that these novel figures have entered his canvas points to the many outside influences that began to enter Netherlandish painting in the early 16th century. With the advent of printing, works by Italian artists were becoming known, as were the prints of the German artist Dürer, who made it his life's work to bring the Italian Renaissance style to the north. In the Bible story, Christ restores the sight of an old man who has been blind from birth. Leiden and his contemporaries tried to make the events of the Bible real to the average viewer by showing divine figures mingling among ordinary people. They also dressed their characters in the clothing of the 16th century Netherlands. Leiden was unusual among the Netherlandish artists of his day in the way he painted secondary characters. Rather than stand by as observers, these characters react with gesture and emotion to express the intensity of the unfolding drama, much like characters in a play. Here, a small boy stands in awe of Christ. Just as the secondary characters refuse to stand idly by as ornament, the landscape resists consideration as decoration alone. Instead, it is a spirited, moved, and involved participant. The healing of the blind man of Jericho was first acquired by the Hermitage in 1772. Sold in 1854, the painting was purchased again 32 years later in 1886. From 16th century Netherlandish art rose the landscape tradition in painting. Panoramic vistas attesting to the beauty and grandeur of nature were becoming accepted topics in their own right. In the painting of Joachim Patinier, the landscape assumes primary significance. Once the very inspiration to the painting and central to its composition, the small virgin and child resting on their flight into Egypt are almost incidental. In miniature, the activities of the peasantry continue. It is the massacre of innocents, an event that precedes the flight into Egypt. The scene is an attempt at narration. Patinier represents man's potential for violent, misguided cruelty in an otherwise idyllic world. He shows the landscape as God's perfect, guileless creation, an awesome and compelling force that dwarfs human activity. Sensitive to the varying textures of trees, hills, and sky, Patinier offers an aerial view of a broad, far-reaching land. This landscape with the flight into Egypt is by Harry Met who continued Patinier's style of painting. He placed tiny figures in a landscape of mountain vistas and dark forests. An unknown artist, known only as master of female half-lengths, managed to show the harmony between humanity and the surrounding world. His Virgin Mary is more a goddess of the renewed earth than queen of the heavens. The infant reaches for grapes which symbolize Christ's blood, shed for the redemption of man. Ladies Making Music is also believed to have been painted by either the master of female half-lengths himself or by a painter in his workshop. Secular painting began to flourish in the 16th century. This work shows the music-making of a group of society women. The artist has made sure that we are able to identify even the piece of music being performed by faithfully replicating the notes of the music book held by the musician. The score is a piece by composer Claudin de Saint-Merci, with words set to a poem by French poet Clément Marot. "I'll give you joy, my friend," sings the soprano, "and I will take you where hope is calling you. As long as I live, I will not leave you, and even when I die, my soul will still remember you." While she is singing soprano, the lute player is gently strumming the melody. When originally acquired, many Netherlandish works were wrongly attributed. This painting was falsely thought to be by the German artist Hans Holbein. With a firm grip on their guns and stern posture, men of the Amsterdam Civic Guard posed for one of the first group portraits in Northern European painting. The work was painted in 1532 by Dirk Jacobs. He was one of the founders of the genre of group portraiture that developed in the Netherlands in the first third of the 16th century. Many of the artists who devoted themselves to portraiture now went to Italy to study their craft. Before this time, groups memorialized in portraiture were shoved into the recesses of religious works. Posing in the uniform of their corporation, the men pictured stand without narration, anecdote, or even interaction among themselves. Each guardsman stands alone, looking outward to the viewer. "17 faces compete on equal terms for our attention." Fair with Pageant is the work of Peter Bruegel the Younger, inspired by a painting by his father and teacher, Peter Bruegel the Elder. Unlike other Renaissance artists, Bruegel was not so much interested in individual personalities as he was fascinated by the rituals and festivities of the peasants. The composition is an endless procession of anonymous faces, figures, and activities during a peasant church festival called the Kermesse. Gathered around an outdoor stage, the countrymen watch a popular play about moral indiscretion. Pictured here is a scene in which a man returns home to find his wife unfaithful. Netherlandish art of the 16th century was moving toward more secular and humanized themes. This trend found full, resplendent expression in the painting of Bruegel. Bruegel's eye, paintbrush, and very heart pan across a teeming and radiant tapestry of humanity. With insight and uncanny ability, Bruegel recorded the activity and merriment of the peasants and their festivals. There has been considerable debate over whether there resides within this work any latent or explicit moral judgment of these peasants. Some say the painting is an indictment of the relaxed moral code of the lower class. Others insist it is a joyful picture of a good-humored rural community. The small figures that populate and crowd his canvases find their source in Bosch and Jan Mandine. However, Bruegel's work seemed to lack the bitter overtones of his predecessor's work. The figures here are spirited and hearty. Nicknamed funny and peasant Bruegel by his contemporaries, Bruegel considered the commoners to be the salt of the earth and restricted his palette to the rustic-toned yellows, browns, and greens of the land. Painted with a view as from a watchtower, Bruegel's masterpiece finds a universe of infinite folly and wisdom in the lives and rituals of the simple folk. Whether his painting judges, describes, or celebrates, the detail and scope of Bruegel's scenes will always excite the eye and inspire the soul. Another Bruegel, the Adjuration of the Magi. The gospel scene of Christ is lost amidst his biting description of the countryside and the ravages of the Netherlandish winter. As in the festival scene, the tone of Bruegel's palette mirrors the mood of the painting. Here the dense and sombre hues of grey and black describe both the beauty and chill of the dark and cold northern winter. Bruegel peopled his pictures of the changing landscape with the commoners who worked and depended upon the earth. The human figure neither overwhelms the landscape nor becomes lost in it. It's a refreshing compromise of two independent strains in the history of Netherlandish art. In Bruegel's painting, portraiture and landscape find a synthesis. Art's debt to the Netherlandish tradition stretches from the invention of oil paint to the development of realism and humanistic themes. The Northern Renaissance ushered art from the limitations of service to the medieval church to a wellspring of new ideas.